Welcome to Off the Record, a legal podcast.
Hello and welcome to Off the Record, a legal podcast with attorney Rhett Burney. With years of experience in family law, personal injury cases, and estate planning services, Rhett and his team are well-versed in providing top-tier legal representation for individuals across the great state of South Carolina. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're going to talk about the probate process, common challenges, and how to overcome them. Rhett, great to see you.
Great to see you, Kevin.
You ready to talk probate?
Yeah, why not? Everybody dies. Might as well talk about something that we all have in common.
That's true. That is definitely, in a divided world, that is something we can all unite on. That's for sure.
We can all unite on that. That's right.
I feel like people are scared of the word probate. I have a wife who's a realtor, and we've heard probate stuff. I've heard people talk about it. Is it as scary as people make it out to be?
No, and I can't, in dealing with it every day, this is my 30th year, Kevin, being a lawyer, and we deal with it every day, and everybody comes in and they're so scared of probate, want to avoid probate, and it's not as bad as people believe it to be. I mean, there's obviously some outliers there, but for the most part, it's just a bunch of forms and getting things done and making sure people get their stuff, but it's not nearly as difficult as people tend to believe. What
do you hear the biggest myths or misconceptions that people come with that they're so scared about?
Yeah, that it costs too much, takes too long. Those are the main ones. It does take a while.
Sure.
But what doesn't? It's, all things considered, it does take a while because what you're doing is dividing your stuff, right? Kevin dies today. We got to figure out how we're going to divide his stuff. And you've got so much stuff.
I do.
It's just naturally going to take it a while. But I think those are the common misconceptions. And there's truth behind those. It's not necessarily more expensive, but I think the reason why people have a problem with probate is they hear about those cases that are being fought in probate, where you have families fighting each other. That happens. And that happens whether you have a will or don't have a will, whether you have a trust or not a trust. And I think that's probably why people have a bad taste about probate. But usually the result of probate is just bad planning in the first place. Most of the fights that we have are because people don't plan properly. Usually when you plan properly with a lawyer, not with whoever you use, Kevin, I don't know who that person is, but with a lawyer, that you can avoid probate or avoid the problems of probate, it's not as bad.
My lawyer's name is Zoom, first name Legal. I'm just kidding.
I encourage everyone to use LegalZoom to draft their documents because you will mess them up so badly that it'll cost you so much more for us as lawyers to go fix it. So yeah, go do that.
LegalZoom, a lawyer's best friend.
Yeah, it is.
I've heard people say before that they as a misconception or a misunderstanding maybe of that they think that the state decides where stuff goes in probate. Is that something you hear too?
Well, if you die without a will, then the law comes in, right? And then we will have, it's called, you've died intestate at that point in time, not testate, intestate without a will. And then the law tells those people who have survived you how your estate's going to be divided. So for instance, if you die without a will or a trust and you have a wife, she'll get everything. But if you have a child, you have a wife and a child, then your wife will get half and your child will get half. But if you have, 4 children and a wife, then your wife will get half and your children will get,
split the other half. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happens. And then, you may have someone who dies at a very, very old age without a will, and you have to start looking at who are the survivors. And the problem with that is, you have family members who've predeceased family members and they've moved all across the country and trying to locate them. So, and that happens all the time. We have many, many cases like that right now with that. That's the main problem. It's because someone didn't want to pay the money to have these documents produced. And lots of times what happens, Kevin, is people think, oh, everybody's going to be all right. They're all going to get along. They know exactly. I told them exactly how I wanted all my stuff. Well, guess what? People forget and people fight. So don't rely upon those people who survive you to do the right thing. Put it in writing.
Does a will or a trust guarantee that you avoid probate?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. With a trust, if you don't put all the property that you own into the trust, then that property that's not in the trust will have to be probated. And if you have a will, you'll still go through probate, but it's a lot easier than if you didn't have a will, because you'll still go through probate just with with having a will, it tells us how you want your property to be divided. And we'll say 9.9 times out of 10, the court will follow the will and divide the property how it's supposed to be divided.
Okay. So it doesn't guarantee you don't go to probate, but it helps a lot.
It helps a lot. Yeah. It helps a lot. It saves money by spending money now, believe it or not. I mean, getting a will is cheap, is very cheap, considering how much it costs to go through litigation when you have family members fighting over all of your stuff because you didn't have a will. Right. So if you love your lawyer, don't get a will. Make sure you make everybody who's left behind is going to have to fight over your estate.
Think of the lawyers, people.
They have to, right? We got to eat too.
Got to eat too. Are there specific types of assets or estates that are more prone to probate disputes?
Not really. I usually see people fight over things when they don't have a lot. And I don't know why that is, but that's typically what happens. It's the personal property, the stuff that really doesn't matter. Usually when you have, and I don't know why this is, Kevin, you have larger estates, most of those people are able to get things resolved. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't need everything. They don't need money. I don't know. But it's usually the ones where the estates don't have a lot of assets that people do the most fighting.
Yeah, probably right. You're probably right that they have enough stuff, and if they've gotten enough money sent their way, then they're fine. Maybe they don't have a connection to the other stuff that's around, so there's no fighting about that, perhaps.
Yeah, it's not worth it, right? Peace is a hot commodity. Some people just don't want to fight about everything. Some people do.
How do you help kind of coach families to prevent conflicts and legal challenges after a loved one passes when they're going through probate? Do you have to kind of play family cop every once in a while?
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do. Had this situation where they want us to read the will to everybody. That's so TV show, that's so movies, whatever. We don't really have a reading of the will.
Everybody sits around in the lawyer's office and hears what they're getting. Yeah. That is definitely very big in the movies and TV.
Yeah. And I've done that a couple of times, and it is so uncomfortable for the lawyer because I'm looking at everybody's faces to see, all right, who's going to be mad that they didn't get something?
Who's going to be ticked off about this? Yeah.
So I don't advise that. I don't advise it. Really what we tell people is just be honest. People want to cheat people out of things, and we see that through the probate process. And it's just put it out there. Remember, when you're administering an estate, it's not your stuff. It's somebody else's stuff. Mm-hmm. So try to go with what they wanted. If you know what they really wanted, go with it. But human nature is human nature, and it can be an evil thing sometimes.
Absolutely. I've heard of something called a personal representative in the probate process. Can you explain what that is and what that role is?
Yeah. So the personal representative is South Carolina. It's called different things in different states. That is the person who administers the estate, who makes sure that people get what they're supposed to get from the estate, according to the will or per the law. They're the ones who run the estate, sign the documents for the estate, sign checks for the estate. Typically what they do is they just come to the lawyer's office. We do all the work and they just sign the documents. But the personal representative is the person who has the legal authority to act on behalf of the estate. The estate meaning over the property that the person who's passed away, what they've left behind.
How does that differ from a trustee?
It's very similar. They're almost identical. It's just the trustee is the person who's in charge of the trust. The personal representative is in charge of the estate. Their duties they're almost the same thing. They're just triggered in two different circumstances. One, whether you do or don't have a will, or two, if you have a trust. Trust is the trustee is the person over the trust, and the personal representative is the person who would be over an estate, whether you have a will or don't have it.
So that's where the difference is. If you don't have a will, then you need to have some sort of personal representative making sure everything gets divvied out properly.
Well, and there also, when you have a will, you have that person too. So the personal representative will be appointed whether you have a will or whether you don't have a will. They serve the same purpose. Just when you write a will, you name the person you want to be your personal representative. If you don't have a will, then the law will tell you those people who have priority to be a personal representative.
So how does the process start? So someone dies without a will or a trust. What happens? How does it go into probate? What does the process look like?
Yeah, you have to file a petition. It's a legal document with the court. if they have a will, you record the will. If they don't have a will, then you note that on the petition, and that gets
who's filing the petition? Just a representative of the family?
Yeah, it could be the representative of the family. If the person has a will, it's usually the person who's named as the personal representative. They will do it. If they don't have a will, it's going to be a spouse or a sibling or a child who starts it. And so we file that. It starts the case, opens up an estate, and then the ball starts rolling from there. And then you have to get the personal representative appointed, and then makes a determination of what assets the estate holds, and then make sure that everything's taken care of and the estate assets are doled out, administered at the end of the probate process.
And how long does the process typically last? I know we kind of talked about this a little bit at the beginning. I don't know if we ever set a time, but what kind of time frame are we looking at?
Yeah, I mean, we have a statutory time, but the reality of it is, how long does it really take? It usually takes 9 months to a year. But we have those cases where the time limit has run and we can close the estate, but because of the fighting or the infighting between the people, we can't get it closed because we have litigation going on. And we have cases that last years because of the amount of fighting that people are doing. It just drags the case out.
What is it about that? Is it seriously just like you're in is it fighting in court? Is it fighting behind the scenes? Like how does that work?
Both. So it will ultimately end up in court, but there's a lot of fighting behind the scenes where people can't agree on what assets the estate has, how those assets are to be divided, who spent what, who stole what. We hear that all the time. Jimmy stole from mama before she died. Where's that money? Or, you always hear about the safe that supposedly had $1 million of cash in it. Now all that's gone and nobody can prove it. And, it's fun from a lawyer's perspective because we have interesting stories that come up, but usually it's those types of situations that cause the fighting.
Can you give any one of those great stories?
Let's see. You don't want to hear a murder story?
Give me the murder story if you want to say it so bad.
We'll do that the next time because it's going to take a little while. It's very intriguing and very detailed. But the next podcast we have, Kevin, that is our first thing that we're going to talk about is the murder story.
All right, we're going full true crime next time.
Full crime. That's right.
But do you have any stories of like, where the probate process was dragged on for some ridiculous reasons that you can share?
Oh yeah. Let's see if I can think of one. Typically it's missing property, right? You can't find it. I have a case that we just finished where husband and wife were married. It was a second marriage. The kids didn't like the mother. And so when she passed away, and it wasn't her mother, it was her mother, because they were mad at her, they kept fighting and nobody could agree to bury her or have her cremated. So she sat in a cooler for a year, not a little drink cooler.
Not a Yeti or an igloo.
Not a Yeti, but the poor old lady, she never could be buried because nobody wanted to agree with anybody, so we couldn't have her cremated or buried. So those are the types of silly things that we get in touch with. I've had those where we've had people that are cremated only to find out that those aren't cremains, that's concrete. Where's the body? Those types of things. There's always a little bit of interesting things like that. You have to give me a heads up next time. We have great stories. For me, they're very, very boring, but for you, they'd be very, very interesting because I see crazy stuff all the time.
That's right.
So,
that's right. Yeah. Well, maybe after our murder episode, we'll just do a one where you just tell crazy stories.
I think that's what we'll do. Crazy stories from the legal podcast.
From the legal podcast. I love it. All right. Well, thanks for tuning into Off the Record, a legal podcast with attorney Rhett Burney. For more information or to connect with Rhett and his team, you can visit rhettburney.com. And you can also like and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate that. Rhett, I always appreciate your time. Great to see you again.
Same here, Kevin. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.